Good morning. Today is the second day of Nisan, the 10th of April. And we're on the fourth reading of Parashat Tazria. Today we'll get to see a lot more of the details that have to do with tzarat, which is a disease that's usually called leprosy. Again, it doesn't have any connection to the modern disease, which is caused by a bacteria or maybe a virus, not sure. The fourth reading is a good time to talk about combinations. And what do we mean by combinations? Well, there could be that on a person's skin there are two lesions from different colors. If you remember yesterday, we talked about the colors, the white colors, the different shades of the lesions. We said there's two main categories. They're called set and baheret, or raised and brilliant, or bright. And then each one of these has a subtype. And they are shaded differently. So then there's this question, which is a general question in Torah in many areas. Do two things of different categories combine? And if they do, how does that work? Well, we would assume, let's look at these, that the main category, the main color of the main category would connect with, would combine with the subtype. But not necessarily that the two main categories connect between themselves. And what do we mean exactly? So there's a minimal amount of area that needs to be affected in the lesion. So let's say a person has half of that minimal area, which is like a half of a pea. This is what it's described as, a split pea. So you take it that size, that would be like the minimum amount of area that somebody would be considered to have a tzarat lesion. And he doesn't have one that's that minimal size, but he has two that are adjacent and they touch one another, and each one is from a different color, so they're from two different categories. So the question then becomes, do they combine or don't they? So that's the general question that we're going to look at, and there's going to be a lot to speak about that. So let's look again. The set, the first major category called set is what we call wool white. And then there's the bright, which is called snow white. Okay, those are the two major categories. Then we have, each one of them has a subtype. And the subtypes in general have the same name. They're called sapachat, but it means like a subtype. And the highest shade of white is, again, the snow white, the baheret. Its subtype is called like the lime of the temple. Then we have the raised, the set, and its subtype is called like the membrane of an egg. So those are the four colors. We saw this yesterday, and we said that it has to be the size of a split bean for it to be considered a tzarat lesion. So the question now becomes, which combinations are considered combinations? In other words, we can have 6 possible combinations here, and let's spell them out. So we have the two top categories, bright and raised, set and baheret together. That could be one combination. The second combination could be the bright, the baheret, with its subtype called the lime of the temple. So that could be a second combination. Third combination could be the raised, the set, and its subtype, the membrane of an egg. Then we could have the bright, the baheret, with the subtype of the other category, the membrane of an egg. Then we could have the raised, the sate, with the subtype of the other category, which is lime of the temple. And finally, we could put the two subtypes together, so we'd have lime of the temple with membrane of an egg together. Now, most of the commentaries on the Mishnah in Negaim, this is where the tractate that deals with this, so they say that only 3 of these combinations are valid, meaning that the size of the lesion is considered to grow if you have these two categories, and then they could be the minimal size together. And those are 1, 2, and 3. So just, again, what were they? They're the two top categories, the set and the baheret, the raised and the brilliant or the bright. They combine, and each one of these with its subtype, they also combine. But 4, 5, and 6 that we just described, they won't combine. They don't go together. Maimonides, and this is amazing, this is discussed by everyone. Maimonides gives a different ruling, which is almost hard to understand. He argues that all the shades of white combine. There's no difference. All 6 combinations are valid. But then he himself asks, if this is true, then what benefit is there to telling the difference between the shades in the first place? Because what we're saying is basically if it's any one of these shades, and I remind you that all these shades are a certain level of white and up. So the lowest is what we call the lime of the temple. That's the lowest level. If anything is whiter than that, it's tzarat, and we don't care if it's this type or that type. Yeah, so the Torah could have made it a lot simpler. It would have just said, if you see a lesion that's whiter than the lime of the temple, that's tzarat. It doesn't matter if it's this combination or that combination. Who cares? It doesn't matter. So Maimonides himself asks, what good is this? And let me read what he says. He says, if so, why did the sages count them and say the shades of tzarat, blemishes, are 2, which are 4? Right? So that one will understand the different appearances. For any priest who does not recognize the different appearances and their names, this is his answer already. You need to know their names. It's almost like it's like a dictionary. You have to know what everything is called. For any priest who does not recognize the different appearances and their names when he is taught and informed, should not assess a lesion until he understands them and recognizes them and can say, this is the bright, and this is its subtype, this is the raised, and this is its subtype. Okay, so what is he telling us? He's saying that this is a requirement of the priest who is taking care of this person who's ill with tzarat. But again, we still ask a question, so what's the differential? Who cares? He knows all the names, he can identify them, but there's nothing to do with them. So what does he want? Again, Maimonides doesn't really have to ask anything beyond this, because it's almost like to know something is a requirement to be able to treat it, even if there is no difference in treatment. Even if there is, it's like saying you have to know what these things are, even though in the end you treat them exactly the same. There's no difference. But the Torah can require that. It can say there's something in your mind that needs to know this if you're going to be a priest who's going to be dealing with this. So, let's try to understand what's going on. Let's turn again to what is the problem at the root of tzarat. We didn't get a chance to talk about this yesterday, even though it was part of the planned class yesterday. The root, the way it's described in Chassidut and in Kabbalah, is that there are 2 influences on a person, his mother and his father. Of course, in Kabbalah and Chassidut, we don't say it that way. We use more symbolic language. We call it the father principle and the mother principle. They're what we call Abba and Ima, Partzuf Abba and Partzuf Ima. But you can understand this, and definitely Chassidut understands it this way, is that this also refers to every person's individual mother and father. A way that I usually, when I'm introducing Kabbalah to someone that they're only beginning to study, and I have one-on-one sessions with them, so I tell them the simplest thing to think about is that within each of us there are many different personas. We have a persona representation of our parents, father and mother separately. We have a persona representation of our masculine side, of our feminine side. We also have a persona representation, even if we don't know about it directly, we never met them. But there are always things that go around, and people want to fill in these personas of our grandparents. These also affect us. With our parents, we have 2 separate personas for each one. There's the parent, the way that we know they present themselves to the world, and there's our parent, the way we know that they are in the home. There are 2 different personas. And this is exactly what Kabbalah describes, 12 different personas in each person. These personas are not necessarily independent, they're not autonomous, they don't do whatever they want, but they're things that live in us. So when we say that someone has tzarat, we say he has only influence from the mother principle and not from the father principle. He's missing the father principle. In classic Chassidus, classic Chassidut, we would say what this means is that the person has a lot of intellect, but he has no self-nullification. He has no ability to nullify before that which is above him. Another way of saying this would be that you have a very wise, very smart person who's an autodidact even. They can figure out a lot of things by themselves, but they don't have a father principle, means that they can't sit and listen to others, or they can't ever manifest what King Solomon said, who is wise, he who learns from everyone. They can't learn from other people. They have to do it themselves. They have to figure it out themselves. That would be a person who has a mother but doesn't have a father in this sense. Okay, but here we're going to say it a little bit differently. So what is the difference between the two? The mother represents our connection with reality. And so a lot of times in Chassidus you'll find that the mother principle is what we call the beginnings of reality, Reshita Mitziut. And the father principle refers to the essence. It refers to connecting to things that are essential, spiritual. So the mother represents how we see reality, being connected to reality, being practical, let's call it. And the father is understanding or having a connection to everything that is essential in reality, the essence behind things, not the things the way that they appear in reality. So, if a person is missing his father principle, so it's a very very interesting state. To have a connection with the mother principle alone means to simply know that all the shades of white combine without the need to actually be able to identify the difference between them. So here, what are we saying? We're saying there's no essential difference. The only difference is a practical difference in practice, meaning that the priest looking at it, just knowing, looking at it, is, well, again, not the point of looking at it, but being able to recognize it is like this person has a handle on reality. What does it mean that he's missing the father principle? In the priest, again, we're looking at the priest now, not at the person. The person who doesn't have a father principle, we said, it's like a person who doesn't have the ability to nullify himself. So he's all himself. He's all self-made, as it were. There's nothing outside of him. Maybe I should expand on that, just one more sentence. What it means is, we saw this yesterday, that he's self-exonerating. We said this yesterday, he's a person who sees no fault in himself, but he sees all the faults in everyone else. And that's why he can't, maybe that's one of the reasons why he can't hear wisdom from anyone else. He can't accept anything from everyone else, because everybody else is not on his level. He doesn't think that he has anything to hear from them. So now comes the priest, and we're saying that the priest has two parts to him. The one part is his practical part. That's his mother principle. His mother principle, the priest, is knowing the differences. He needs to know. He needs to, like in a dictionary, he needs to know this is this white shade, this is that shade of white, that's that shade of white. It's just knowledge. But the priest does something more. And this we see if we look at the verse that we're looking at today, hopefully. Well, it's not in the verse that I chose, but if you open up in Leviticus 13, you'll see it all through. It's mentioned about a dozen times that the priest is constantly gazing at the lesion. He's constantly looking at it. Why does he need to look at it? Well, in Kabbalah and in Chassidut, the gaze of the eyes is the father principle. It's exactly related to that. It's called the wisdom in the person. It's the father principle in the person. So what the priest does is he's giving the person who's ill with the tzarat a father principle to replace what he's missing. It's like he's looking upon him. He's giving him that father principle. How? Because he's saying, this is wisdom that even if I explained it to you, sort of like what Maimonides is saying, even if I explained it to you, you wouldn't be able to really find a differential. You wouldn't really be able to use it practically. Again, the mother is the practical side. This is something essential. And he's saying, this is what's hiding behind the whole idea that they all combine. So why do you need different colors? Because there's something behind all of this. To say it another way, when people grow up in a way that they feel that the world is boring, everything is the same, everything is exactly the same, or so they're missing the essence. They're missing something that's hiding behind reality. And that the priest gives them. And again, specifically here, what he's doing is, he's saying, even though these are all shades of white, by my looking at it, it's giving it new meaning. That meaning is something that you can't find in the practical world, because in the practical world, there's no differential between them. They're all exactly the same. But that meaning, which is what makes every life different, which makes every day different, which makes every time you pray different. When you pray, you're saying the same words again and again and again. So what's the difference between them? What's the differential? The differential is only if you have the father principle. When you have the father principle, when you have that gaze of the priest, then you get a feeling that everything is unique, that everything is one time, everything is one event. It'll never repeat again. But again, could be that in practical reality, everything looks the same. What's the point? There's no difference in the combinations. They're all the same. That the priest gives. And apparently, that is what the father gives that the mother cannot. The father gives us, or is meant to give us, this feeling that the world is special, that life is special. The mother usually takes care of nature. By nature, we usually mean, like Mother Nature, we mean those rules, those laws that repeat constantly. There's always food, there's always, it seems like it's repetitive. But the essence, the meaning behind things, let's call it the mystical, the supernatural, all that is the task of the fathers in our life. There's many fathers in our lives. Again, it could be our own personal father. It could also be a teacher. It could also be a neighbor. It could be someone else who's giving us that feeling that today is special. This thing is special, even though you've seen it 100,000 times, even though it's exactly the same. All the breaths are the same. But no, they're all different. And it's not in the differential. You can look practically for the difference from now till the end of time. You won't find it. It's something about the meaning of things. So with that, let's end today. And I hope to see you tomorrow with a very, very special installment. This one is special because it's simple. It's not going to be hard. But I think it'll blow your socks off. See you tomorrow.